Joining us now on the Heisman Trophy Podcast is Max Browne, formerly of USC and the University of Pittsburgh. Welcome, Max.
What's up, Chris? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we just talked to John Meteer, and I thought it'd be great to get a former quarterback on the show to talk about what's so special about his game. So thanks for coming on.
For sure. Yeah, you want me to jump right into it?
Yeah, I just say, let's right off the bat from what you've seen. What's your overall assessment of his game right now?
Yeah, my first true time seeing him was the Apple Cup of last year, his matchup versus Washington. And, from afar, I had called and covered a bunch of Washington State games during my time with the Pac-12 networks. And I didn't really know who this guy was. It was always like, Cam Ward was, for obvious reasons, he was the splashy guy. And it was like, oh, man, the Cougs are going to be in real trouble with Cam Ward moving away. And then with every month in the offseason, it was like, nah, I think we're going to be fine with this Meteer guy. And then when you turned on that film, the matchup last year versus Washington, which that was one of the more high-profile matchups, given that, Washington State's not in a elite conference anymore. But he is clearly the best player on the field. And I think what people may underestimate about his ability is you see the highlight reels with his legs, but I think he can totally beat you and win games from the pocket, which that's obviously what you want from a dual threat quarterback. But there's a lot of college quarterbacks that I think for them to play at their highest level, their legs have to be a critical factor in a game. I don't think that's the case with John Meteer. I think John Meteer could run for 10 yards in a game and still play lights out because he has the ability to beat you from the pocket.
Yeah, totally. He had a really nice run in that game where he showed a nice cutback ability. I think he might have had he had a couple big runs and a couple just big time throws. How would you describe his style of play compared to other college quarterbacks that you've covered or played with?
Yeah, it's funny. The two guys that stick out these weren't guys that I played with, but Baker Mayfield, one, and Johnny Manziel, another. I think he is faster than Baker Mayfield and probably more along in terms of like actual speed and elusiveness, more of the Johnny Manziel side.
Mm-hmm.
But he seems sturdy. He seems like he could hang in the pocket, and that was a little bit of Baker Mayfield's magic is, hanging in there, taking the hits, being gritty and sturdy in the pocket, which isn't always the sexiest thing to say, but I think that is a value. And obviously, it's of note saying Baker Mayfield to a guy that's now also wearing the Oklahoma jersey. And I've seen a couple articles of John being like, you know what, I don't want any part of that. But I do think there is overlap in some of that skill set. And Baker was obviously very good from the pocket. If John could be even remotely close to that, I think Oklahoma could have a really good year.
Yeah, there was an element of like the sandlot football a little bit to his game last year. A lot of times you'd see him like he'll like roll left, and then instead of setting his feet, he might like throw it awkwardly. What stands out about his throwing mechanics, his release, his footwork, his pocket movement, all that kind of stuff?
I view it as a positive. Yeah, I don't view that as a negative. I mean, to me, there's two separate things. There's the arm slot, and then there's the footwork, which I've seen criticism on both sides. I've seen the criticism that, hey, his footwork looks a little sporadic and chaotic at times. I was the guy that grew up watching Peyton Manning, and his feet was like noteworthy for how chaotic and scrambly they were. But I think that was more him just staying active and whatnot, and it wasn't necessarily a panic level there. That's how I view Meteer's footwork. The arm slots, I view that as a positive just in today's game with, the RPO world, run pass option being so significant in college football, the ability to throw at a different arm slots, to me, that's a positive. And I think at the end of the day, when he does have a clean pocket and it's 3rd and 6 and he's dropping back, he can totally throw the ball with strong mechanics. So the fact that he can do both, I view as a positive.
Yeah, all that artistry aside, are there any mechanical tweaks you think could maybe help him improve his accuracy a bit or maybe his consistency?
I guess to me, it's just that next level notch command of the passing game, because when your mechanics are in sync with what your eyes are seeing down the field, that's obviously that's the rhythm you want to be in. Where guys get in trouble, where I think a John might get in trouble, is if, hey, there's indecision in what I'm seeing in the pass concept down the field, especially as he's moving to the SEC. Does that then lead to bad footwork because his eyes aren't where they need to be? So to me, it's more of a, hey, make sure his brain and his eyes are locked in, especially with obviously seen much better defenses, and then that'll lead to good mechanics and footwork.
Yeah. Looking at decision making and field vision, from what you can tell, looking at his tape, how well does he process defenses pre and post snap?
I think it's strong. I don't see a guy that is relying every single time to see a receiver open. I mean, I go back to that Washington game again that was early on in last season. There's a lot of throws in there where he's on the far right hash throwing to the left sideline, and the only way you're doing that is if you're anticipating the throw. So I think that's a strong skill set of his. I certainly wouldn't say that's a weakness, but sometimes that is, right? If you're a dual threat quarterback, you have the luxury of a lot of teams lining up in man against you, which then makes the picture very clean when you're reading defenses. So you have the luxury of seeing guys open and seeing your receivers get separation. I don't think that's necessarily the case for John. For all these quarterbacks that are transfer guys or at new schools, that's always the decision or like always the talking point of like, can they level up their command across the board with the offensive scheme? In year two with Ben Arbuckle, I'd expect that to be the case, but I certainly don't think it's a weakness of Meteer's game.
Yeah, kind of stepping aside and talking about the transfer aspect really quick. You were a transfer. You went from USC to Pitt. He's had to come in, and obviously, I think you had to sit out a year, right? Before.
No, I graduated, so I did the grad transfer
okay.
right in there. Yeah,
right. So there's a process of coming to a new place and getting to know people. Is there like a tried and true approach to finding a way to feel comfortable in a new situation like that, especially in this short period of time? He's only had 8 months so far. You had to go through it. What was kind of the approach you took, and what is he going through right now in that kind of situation?
my approach was, hey, every locker room speaks hard work. And what I mean by that is like if you show up and take care of your business, everyone's going to respect that. Whether you're at a Division II school, whether you're at Pitt, whether at USC, Washington State, wherever. What I can't relate to for John is in my brain, I was going down a notch from USC to Pitt, from a blue blood program to a program that still, expects to be in the top 25 every year. But from my vantage point, it wasn't the pressure and intensity of what it was at USC. Obviously, John going from Washington State to Oklahoma for a staff that's likely coaching for their jobs this year, it's a different level of expectations. And then I also can't relate to the fact that he's coming with his offensive coordinator, which is a huge factor in terms of not having to learn a new offense and all that. Like for me, the hardest part of transferring to Pitt was having to learn another new offense as a older upperclassman, which at that point you're hopeful, like I'm past those days, right? That's what my freshman and sophomore year were for. That was not my case at Pitt, which I think will help John out at Oklahoma.
That's really a unique situation for him. That's one of the reasons why him going over there is so intriguing. Going back to his physical talent, his arm talent, his ball placement, how would you grade his arm strength and his ability to make throws at all the levels?
I'd say B plus. I mean, I don't turn on the film and say, "Oh wow, this is a guy that can't make the throws," but I also don't turn on the film and say, "Wow, this guy has a rocket arm."
Mm-hmm.
The line that I've been using all off season though is from a film evaluation standpoint. John Meteer's 2024 film was better than Cam Ward's 2023 film.
Mm-hmm.
Take that however you will. Whether Cam was the best quarterback in college football last year, like that's doing something right. Obviously, he was the number one pick in the draft. I think Cam has maybe a little bit more ceiling to tap into than John does at current date, like in their respective preseason college football years. But Meteer's film's legit.
Yeah. It's funny. They say history repeats itself, or sometimes it rhymes. And you look at Cam Ward starting out where he did in Texas and not being recruited, going to Washington State, leveling up to Miami, first pick in the draft. And you got John Meteer, same situation, going to Washington State, leveling up to Oklahoma. What do you see him as far as like his ceiling? Can he be someone who is eventually a high draft pick if his production shows up this year at Oklahoma?
In terms of ceiling, in terms of best case scenario, without a doubt. If we're seeing it out of guys, I know Johnny Manziel's career didn't work out, but he was a first round draft pick. Baker's obviously had, after some twists and turns, a successful career. Like best case scenario, ceiling, I do think that John has that capability. He needs to take a big step to get there. Don't get me wrong. And obviously, back up the expectations and show that his game can translate to a higher level of college football. But ceiling, best case scenario, totally. Even more so, like that's easy to say, but like for example, like Fernando Mendoza is another top transfer quarterback that went to Indiana. I don't like a lot of people have him as a first round guy. I don't think his ceiling's there. So that's not just like the easy answer. Could he be an NFL guy? For sure. But first round guy, I'm not there with a guy like Fernando Mendoza. I'm not necessarily there with, some of the other Darian Mensah or guys like that. Meteer, I think, and the reason is I think Meteer can win from the pocket first, and the legs are a supplemental bonus versus my sense is the average college football fan kind of feels like Meteer was just running around up in Pullman and being a better athlete than everyone. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot more to his game than that.
Yeah, it seems like it. And one of the things I think those critics don't really talk about is, yeah, he was at Washington State and didn't necessarily have the high level competition that he's going to have. On the other hand, he's got people around him, perhaps who are maybe more talented, more depth than he probably had at Washington State. Although Washington State had an excellent receiving core.
I agree with that. I've been a big fan. I called Jaden Knott's first ever college football game, and that guy is special. And he was hurt last year, so I mean, Oklahoma fans know him. I mean, as a top running back transfer, but that dude is special. If they can keep him healthy, and that's a combo in the backfield, that could be a huge value add to support John Meteer with a run game there.
Mm-hmm. What part of his game do you think is going to translate best to making this move? Like, he's going to have to adjust some things for sure, but what's going to just naturally be there and really make the biggest impact right away?
I think the improvisation, those skills will translate. I mean, when things break down and he makes a defensive end miss and there's a second play and he scrambles for a first down or finds a receiver leaking out to the edge, that stuff translates. And I think if you're a defensive coordinator, you're going to have to account for his legs as part of your game plan. That's going to translate. To me, is he going to be able to, switch directions and run all over the park and get hit a bunch in the SEC like maybe he did at Washington State? That probably has to get toned down. I'm intrigued to see how all the praise that I've been giving him from a pocket passing standpoint, I think a lot of it will translate, but that's also another big question. But the skills of him making defensive ends miss, getting to that second play, I think translates to the SEC.
Well, Max Browne, one of the finest up and coming analysts in the game, we're going to bring you on by your leave whenever we have a quarterback on, just to have you break him down. Is that okay?
That'd be a blast. Looking forward. I think it's an interesting year where a lot of quarterback battles, a lot of starters that are brand new to their teams that I feel confident in November we'll be talking about guys that in the Heisman conversation that we're not necessarily talking about right now.
So where are some of the places that the people out there can find you and read you and look at your stuff?
Yeah, I've really leveled up the YouTube game this past offseason. So they're just under Max Browne, posting videos every single week. Active on TikTok and Instagram as well, Max Browne, and X as well, Max Browne 4.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll see you down the road.
Thanks, Chris.